LEAD-K Language Equality and Acquisition for Deaf Kids Language Milestones Assessment Webinar. This video recording has audio description narration of video clips that are text only, or feature communication in American Sign Language (ASL) only. The audio description has been added for accessibility purposes.
Thank you all for joining this important webinar. We're thrilled to have you all here this afternoon. We'll give it another 1 or 2 minutes before we start. While we're waiting, I'd like to share that the California Department of Education offers professional development certificates to all attendees who are participating in today's webinar. Your professional development certificate will be sent to the email address that you registered with today. The email that you used to enter into this Zoom webinar. If you do not receive your professional development certificate within the next 4 weeks, so by February 8th, please reach out to Julie Rems Samario at jrsmario@cde.ca.gov. That email address will be put in the chat for you to see. All right, I would like to start the webinar. Next slide, please. Welcome to the CDE State Special Schools Services Division webinar that's focusing on the CDE LEAD-K Language Milestones webinar. We're really excited to be here with you all today to introduce the new statewide assessment tool for deaf children and their early learning language development skills. My name is Nancy Leibach-Amon. I'm the director of the state's Special Schools and Services Division. We have a few quick logistics that I'd like to discuss before we dive into today's content. We will be having a Q&A feature that's available for you at the bottom of your Zoom window. Please feel free to communicate to us through that feature. You can ask questions there as needed. We will do our best to address any of your questions at the end of the webinar. We'll try to address some during the webinar if we can as well. The slide deck and the recording of the webinar will be made available to you. The recorded webinar will be posted on the CDE's website on the State Special Schools and Services Division webpage under CDE's website. Next slide, please. We want to acknowledge that the CDE LEAD-K Language Milestones Assessment was made possible by NorCal Services for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing in conjunction with the California Department of Education State Special Schools Division. This project is supported by the Health Resources and Services Administration, or HRSA, which is a federal grant given in 2024. We want to acknowledge and appreciate the support that we have received from the California Department of Education's Special Education Division. Dr. Rachel Hennon, who is here with us watching today, we just want to acknowledge and express our gratitude for her support in this important work for deaf and hard of hearing students across California. Next slide, please. So we have two important people that made this webinar possible. First is Dr. Julie Rems-Samario, a deaf education programs consultant at the Deaf Education Unit in the State Special Schools and Services Division. Julie co-coordinated California's early hearing detection and intervention, also known as the EHDI or EDI, as the LEAD-K Family Services Program, which is a part of NorCal's services that is supporting at a nationwide level the LEAD-K campaign for early language acquisition, the milestone laws for deaf infants and young children, and co-founded the Co-Fusion Group to address education inequalities through abolitionist work. Julie was honored by CNN Heroes and E-Women's Network in 2007 for her work with Deaf Hope, which supports deaf survivors of abuse. She earned her EDD from the CSU East Bay in 2021 and lives in California with her spouse, where she enjoys spending time with her grandchildren and her chihuahuas. We also have Dr. Cornelia Taylor. She's the research director at the Desired Results Access Project, or DRDP, at the Napa County Office of Education. Dr. Taylor specializes in developing equitable assessments and data systems to improve the outcomes for children with and without disabilities. Her work is grounded in the implementation and science and implementation sciences and focuses on collecting meaningful data that supports culturally and linguistically and radically and inclusive practices. In her role at the DRDP, Cornelia leads statewide implementation of California's early childhood assessment systems. She manages data systems. She conducts quality, equitable decision-making and system improvement work. Thank you, everyone who has helped organize this important webinar. I'd like to turn it over to both Julie and Cornelia to start today's webinar. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Cornelia, if you could come on camera, I'd like everyone to see you as well. Come on camera. Wonderful. So both of us will be presenting today. I will open the presentation and then Cornelia will go in depth about the assessment and training, and then I will close us off. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Cornelia. I will pass this on over to you after I'm done with my part. Next slide, please. So this is a critical assessment, and this opportunity was made possible with Cornelia through the Desired Results Access Program in partnership with NorCal Services for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing and LEAD-K Services, along with California Department of Education, where I work with Nancy Leibach. It's wonderful to see so much progress being made. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. I see I'm freezing a bit here. Give me 1 second. Next slide. Going forward, I will be utilizing the term deaf as an umbrella term to really incorporate the continuum of the deaf identity. This would include hard of hearing, deaf blind, deaf plus, deaf disabled. All of the different identities would be utilized interchangeably, such as deaf, deaf and hard of hearing, deaf blind, but deaf is an inclusive word of all of those so that we're all on the same page and we all share that continuum together. And all of us need to have access to language, regardless of the specific identity. So, what is LEAD-K? What is the campaign all about? Now, LEAD-K is actually an acronym for Language Equality and Acquisition for Deaf Kids. And this leads to kindergarten readiness. This is focused on language equality and recognizing that ASL is on par with English, especially when educating children who are ages 0 to 5. Once kids are 5 years old, we want them to be kindergarten ready and literate so that they can really focus on acquiring literacy skills. This campaign is about passing laws in different states. California was actually the first state to pass LEAD-K, which was known as Senate Bill 210, which includes our language milestones law. This was passed in the year 2015, so it has been a total of 10 years, coming on 11 years. This has been quite the work in progress. Next slide, please. There is little summaries here on this slide, and after working with many of you, I've gotten a lot of feedback and questions about what is the National LEAD-K campaign? What is LEAD-K Family Services, along with what is LEAD-K Language Milestone Assessments? I can answer those for you in a synopsis. LEAD-K is our brand. This is a branding name that emphasizes that ASL and English are on par with each other. They are equal. That is our heavy emphasis there. Now, LEAD-K campaign really started because of really antiquated language development opportunities for deaf children. When they got to kindergarten, they were not uh, excelling with literacy. And it's not because they were deaf, it's because they weren't getting the appropriate services and access at home to support their acquisition and development. So the LEAD-K campaign really basically is early language development milestones. And this is a movement. California is the first state to pass LEAD-K, and it was known as Senate Bill 210. When we passed this in 2015, 22 other states followed in our lead and passed their own lead case laws, which is so exciting. We have 3 states who are currently working on theirs. One is Illinois, the other is Colorado, and the third one is Washington State. Now, moving on to the slide in the middle there is LEAD-K Family Services. This is California Early Hearing Detection. We received a grant. It was a federal grant to run the newborn hearing screening to have that refer over to her early start programs, along with parent mentoring for new families who just found out that their baby is deaf, along with training deaf coaches as well. And deaf coaches are also a part of the LEAD-K assessment results because once they receive those results during an IFSP or IEP, we will have language goals set up. I will expand on language goals a little further in this presentation. Moving to the right of the slide here, this is actually funded by the HRSA grant. This is the Health Resource Services Administration. Now, the LEAD-K Family Services is a program that is provided from NorCal Services for Deaf and Hard of Hearing that is based in Sacramento, and they serve the whole entire state of California. So when your baby is referred to an early start program, that is actually coming from LEAD-K Family Services. Now, the California Department of Education LEAD-K Language Milestones Assessment is really aligned with everything else you see here on the screen. We are required to have an assessment for children who are age 0 to 5, so that's SB 210. Now, LEAD-K Family Services received a grant to run our EHDI program, EDI program, and we just received supplemental funding to establish language milestones. And this is federal funding. NorCal Services for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing has pulled a multitude of individuals to develop something called the CDE, California Department of Education LEAD-K Language Milestones Assessment, LMA, Language Milestone Assessment. I will go into detail about that a little further in the presentation. So LEAD-K is our branding name. That is our national campaign for legislative purposes. And the state of California has its own EDI program, which is the name of our program, along with the name of our Language Milestones Assessment. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of our LEAD-K law here in California, that's Senate Bill 210. We would call it SB 210. With this law placed, this is in Ed Code. California is the first state to officially recognize American Sign Language as an equivalent language to English for the purposes of instruction to deaf children. In Education Code, it states deaf and hard of hearing children from birth to 5 years of age, including those who are both one language of American Sign Language and English. See, we never utilize or, it's always and, American Sign Language and English, because that puts them as an equivalent. Both languages need to be utilized interchangeably. It should never have an or. Because if there is an or statement, families think they need to choose one. You can have both ASL and English or one or the other, but it's to show that those are both equal languages. When it comes to the English portion, this would include spoken English, written English, or English with visual supplements. Next slide, please. The LEAD-K campaign started because of a lot of concerns with the data listed here on this slide. This was published in 2016. However, this data was based on information that was happening prior to 2015 and before that. As you can see, the first blue bar on the left, it says deaf there. So it's reading, writing, and math. The blue one is reading and writing, and it shows only 18% are at grade level. And hard of hearing children are struggling as well. And this is not because of their deafness. This is actually because they are unable to get a foundation of language before the age of 5. So that is why we have a heavy focal point on ages 0 to 5 so that they have a strong foundation of language. Now, how does this happen? This means more accountability, tracking it during the IFSP, during the IEP, to ensure that language goals and services tie in with language tracking. Where is the child at? If the child is at a specific level, we need to set up a plan to ensure that the child is thriving along with their family. The family needs to know how to support and advocate for their child. Next slide, please. Language struggles often cause lack of access and a lack of service, and that actually leads to what we call language deprivation. This is the sign, language deprivation. It's signed this way because this is a sign for withholding. Now, the withholding of language may not always be intentional. And when a child does not have access to any language growing up, this might be a better sign for it because they're limited to how much language they're getting growing up. Language deprivation on a deaf child has severe ramifications on a child's upbringing. I'm going to show you a video that was created in the UK. Now, language deprivation is a global problem, not only in California, but globally. I'm going to show you the video now.
This animated video has the following text. If a child does not have access to language, what does it look like? Difficulty in learning. Struggles with the concept of time. Struggles with abstract concepts. Limited world knowledge. Struggles with relationships. Acting out feelings physically. Struggles with emotional regulation. Is this okay? It's not okay. Deaf children experience language deprivation every day. Hashtag language deprivation is not okay. Time to stop.
You know, it's time to stop this. This is completely preventable on everyone's part. The link to this video is submitted here on the chat, but we have to make small steps to end language deprivation. Next slide. Perfect. Many of you have studied Maslow's hierarchy during college. Some of you may have studied this during high school. Now, Maslow's hierarchy overlooked really looking at basic needs, right? Shelter, food and water, warmth, very, very basic things at the bottom there. There's something that's overlooked here, something that was missing with his work, which was language. He took language for granted. I want to show how language really implies our well-being. The physiological portion here, looking at communication, what we need to comfort us. I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, or I'm cold. We need to be able to have language in order to communicate those needs. Going up a bar here, safety. Access to language allows us to understand and predict the world around us and not to be in a constant state of anxiety. We need to know what's happening around us. Oftentimes, deaf children are anxious because they don't know what's going on in the world, because no one's telling them, no one's communicating with them, nor do they have the language to understand what's going to happen next. Moving up here, belonging. Language instills a sense of belonging by allowing us to discuss ideas and develop trust among peers and family. Belonging is critical. especially for social emotional development. Moving up this here, esteem, self-esteem is critical. A command of language allows us to communicate unique ideas and be respected by others and develop executive functioning skills to be able to self-regulate and manage our emotions, recognize when we're angry or when we're frustrated, and we need language in order to express that. Moving up the hierarchy to the top, which would be self-actualization. This requires language because it allows us to access factual information and morality, especially when it comes to creative discussions. To be able to influence the world, to change the world, that requires self-actualization, but it also requires language, and that is missing in the traditional Maslow hierarchy system. Language and communication is critical for everyday living. Next slide, please. So I really want to emphasize on the 18% point. This is actually just this year. The numbers are the same, folks. And it's been the same since 2016. This is 10 years later. A lot of these numbers are actually kids who went through the COVID era, and there has been quite the impact. Now, as for deaf kids, they're still at 18%, but for the rest, like hearing children, along with hard of hearing, all students at the end, they're actually performing a lot worse than they were 10 years ago. There has been a 25% reduction in them, but however, we are stable as deaf children. And I think that is because of LEAD-K language milestones. There's a lot more accountability tracking and supports, and that was happening during the COVID era. 18% is still not accessible, and we need to increase that. It's not acceptable.
So, how does SB 210 help deaf children and their families? We have 4 questions that we're going to be asking today, and this is the first one. How does SB 210 help deaf families and their children? Next slide. Early language development accountability starts with families and teachers becoming knowledgeable and ensuring that they are monitoring that deaf child's language development. Knowledge is power, and those language milestones give families and teachers a guideline, set of guidelines to look for certain aspects, to be able to identify when things are missing and to supply resources to allow that child to catch up. In the past, the IFSP and IEP discussion looked like before SB 210 was passed, they typically would focus on language domains, checking to make sure the hearing aids worked twice a week, making sure the child went to speech therapy once a week. There was no discussion about language milestones, and that was a big gap in that discussion during IFSP and IEP meetings. With SB 210 passing, it's changed the dialogue. Language milestones have become a part of the discussion, and they are intentionally set during IFSP and IEP meetings. Experts are able to look at the child and where they're at in their language development. If they're meeting certain language milestones, great. If not, how can they support that child? What resources and services can they provide to help them meet those milestones? Again, knowledge is power. Next slide. Families are empowered with knowledge through the parent profile. It's a booklet that has the language milestones laid out in a very simple way. You see it categorized in different ages, birth to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and 4 to 5. And the very end, you see that child with the Captain America costume on. That child is ready for kindergarten. This is used during early start from birth to 36 months and continues when they transition to part C, which is from ages 3 to 5. Or maybe it's part B. Excuse me, it's part B. I get that confused. It was part B, actually. Next slide. This aligns with the language milestones at different ages of 1, 2, 3, and 4, and how a child acquires language. We have this for both ASL and English. We have a lot of English resources, but the ASL resources are lacking. So we're using the ASL portion here to show what it looks like with language development. I'll show you what that looks like now. Can you go back and click the video? You could at the very top, there's a video link.
Did you know that a child's brain is 90% developed by age 5? This is why language foundation must happen from ages 0 to 5. There are different ways you can start building a language foundation with your deaf child. Let's take a look at some of the building blocks. With eye contact, you can connect with your child. And before your child acquires language, you can use gestures and rhythm to introduce and install different concepts. Your child can also pick up information from their surrounding environment. Bit by bit, with love, patience, and commitment, all of this will lead to your deaf child achieving language milestones, such as forming words, short phrases, longer sentences, and ultimately, fluency. This is how your deaf child acquires American Sign Language.
Language is a building block. I love how they use the Lego concept. It's really a nice visual concept for deaf children. It's a building block. And environments are an important part of language acquisition in that process. What deaf children often are missing out on is incidental learning. That's really important, especially for babies birth to age 5. They are missing out on that incidental learning like their hearing peers are getting. There's been a lot of talk about inclusion, and inclusive deaf education for deaf peers means them getting together with other deaf peers and having access to sign language or spoken language, whatever it is their preference is, but having access to deaf peers just like them and being able to pick up on environmental and incidental learning. Next slide. So now part C is early start, birth to 36 months. So until the 3rd birthday of that child. So that's the infant and toddler years. It's really important that they have access to language in their natural environment, which means their home or the toddler program or the play group with their deaf peers. For birth to 3 months, what does language look like? This is important for families to know what to look for, especially at that age, right after that baby is often identified as deaf or hard of hearing. We want to be able to get that parent profile to the parents, maybe from the early start teacher or the special ed teacher, to be talking about what to look for. For example, the baby's looking around, is attentive to people's faces, smiles at you, shows environmental awareness like a light being turned on, recognizes and responds to a person or to movement. So one 9-week-old infant, there's a video, I show it often, I never tire of it. It's a beautiful video of a 9-week-old infant with her grandmother. The grandmother is deaf, and you can see how much language is already happening at 9 weeks old. Could you click the link, please?
This video shows a grandmother holding a baby and signing the following. Yes. I'm funny. Grandma. Can you sign Grandma? Oh. You're so funny. So funny. Oh, funny. Say Grandma. Can you sign Grandma? Yes, that's how you sign Grandma. The baby starts to move her arm and the grandmother signs. Grandma, yes. Yes. That's it. Grandma. That's how you sign grandma. The baby raises her eyebrows as if she understands and raises her arm. The grandmother signs yes. Yes. That's it. Did you see that? Yes, Grandma, yes. Oh no, I'm not going to force you. Okay, okay. Aw, oh my, so cute.
I'm seeing a lot of hearts coming up on the Zoom window. Thank you. I love that video. Next slide, please. From ages 1 to 2, language develops so quickly. So they'll recognize their own name. They'll use names to refer to their family members, to their teacher. They can take turns in conversation. They can use exclamatory expressions like, oh no, showing that on their face. And they can ask questions, where certain things are, how to do certain things. I want to show you an example of a 19-month-old toddler. It's a long video, but I'm just going to show you one moment of it to show you what a 19-month-old toddler with hearing parents can acquire as far as language is considered.
This video features a little girl. She is shown standing next to a car, signing blue car. Sitting on the floor signing bicycle. And then jumping and signing jump. Pointing to the sky and signing airplane. Mimicking holding a phone to her ear and signing telephone. Pointing to herself and signing me. Motioning to her mouth and signing drink. Pointing to a rock and signing rock. Walking up to a red car and signing car red. Pointing to an image of water, then to a firefighter shirt and signing firefighter. And siren alarm.
Okay, we can stop the video there. So wow, you see 2 or 3 signs already being linked together in these examples. Also, turn taking is happening. You can see her talking about colors, different animals, bugs, being able to have cohesion. So she had the firefighter picture she saw and she drew an example to her father's t-shirt. So that is a great example of language milestones for this age. Next slide. So from 2 to 3 years, language is developing quicker and quicker at this time frame. I want to show you what it looks like at this stage. The child will be able to have longer, more complicated sentences. They'll have a vocabulary of 500 plus signs or words. Go ahead and show the video.
This video is titled Conversations with Heath. 3 small children are outside. Heath and a little girl are sitting in a wagon. Thoreau is standing next to them. Thoreau signs, that's mine. Heath signs, no that's mine, pointing to the toy he is holding in his hand. Thoreau signs, I want this. Heath points and signs, there's another one, over there. There are other toys there. They have trains. Thoreau signs, no, no, no. I already got trains. Look! Heath signs, I got an airplane and that is mine. Thoreau squeezes the little girl's cheeks. Heath signs, whoa, what? No, don't squeeze her cheeks. No squeezing. Hey! Thoreau squeezed her cheeks. Yeah, he did it. Thoreau! He squeezed her cheeks. Don't squeeze her cheeks. In the next scene, Heath is on the sidewalk. Heath signs, look. A baby, look. A baby. Where is Thoreau? Hey! Thoreau signs, I'm really tired. Heath signs, you can't go into water. Daddy will be wet. 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 Daddy will be wet. 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 Your clothes will be wet. Heath's dad signs, what? Heath signs, Daddy's clothes will be wet. Heath's dad signs, my clothes? Yeah. In the following scene, Heath and a little boy are sitting with their teacher. Heath signs Tiffany. Tiffany needs to sit down. Tiffany, sit. Tiffany, the teacher, signs, you're right. I am sitting here. They all sign the snack time song. Tiffany signs, go on. Do it again. Heath starts the song again.
So that little boy, Heath, at that day that they're making that filming example, was the last day at his toddler program because the next day was his birthday. He became 3 and he was getting ready to transition to part B, which is the next slide. So this is ages 3 to 5. And this is a really important stage for deaf and hard of hearing children to stay in a program and not drop their services during that transition, because deaf and hard of hearing children are still developing language at this time. They're not done. The first 5 years are an important time for that language acquisition because the brain is still developing. It's still acquiring that language. Even if that child is doing well, they're meeting all the language milestones, that's because you're doing something right with the services. Once the services are dropped, they lose that support for language development and they fall behind. And often deaf children that are dropping services at the age of 3 because they seem to do well, they arrive to kindergarten at the age of 5 behind because they've fallen behind during that lack of service during those years. Even a child with mild hearing loss, they should never be dropped from services. They require that support, they need that interaction with their peers, and they need that ongoing environment. So you can see those 3 pictures on the slide, 3 different examples of them. This again shows incidental learning with their peers, as well as having them in an environment with role models where they can have access to information and know what's happening. It's a really important aspect of language development from 3 to 5. Next slide. Before I start with this, I often support families who are really concerned about losing services during their transitionary period. And I always say, just remember, you have SB 210, you have the language milestones. The child is not done developing their language yet at the age of 3 and 4. They need to have ongoing services to comply with SB 210. And that framing always helps. You can use that framing too, because you have that state law to back you up as a family. So, ages 3 to 4, they become so social. I'm going to show a video of 2 brothers. One brother is 3, the other brother is 4, and I want to show you what their language looks like. Go ahead and
This video opens to the dad, smiling and putting on his seatbelt. In the next scene, 2 preschool children are in car seats in the backseat of a vehicle, with a 3rd child in the 3rd row seat. One child, Tion, signs the car is going up on the lift. The other child, Travis, signs, hey dad. Look, the car is going up on the lift. Tion, hey car. Hey cars. Travis, yap, nodding his head. I love you. I really love you. In the next scene, the car is in motion. Tion, soon, and hey, look out there. He taps Travis' shoulder to get his attention. Travis, yeah, I see the airplane. They both sign, airplane taking off. In the next scene, Travis kicks the back of the front seat to get his parents' attention. Travis, a propeller. Hey, Dad. Tion, a train. Travis, where is the propeller plane? I don't know. Tion, hey. Travis, I don't know. Tion, where's the plane? Travis, it's out there. It's out there. In the final scene, both boys sign helicopter. Travis, where is the helicopter? Tion, where is it? Helicopter. Both boys sign helicopter. Travis, where is the helicopter? Tion, where is it? Helicopter. I don't know. Don't know. Travis, don't know. Tion, where is the train? Hey, Where is the train? The last screen says, visit again soon. www.thebrownfamily.us.
They kept just chatting there, huh? All right. Next slide, please. Okay, now ages 4 to 5. The students in the video I shown, they are
The opening screen reads, Writing Skills in Preschool, 3 years old drawing,
fast forward
scribbling,
this
forming
one.
letters or letter-like symbols. The video proceeds to children drawing on chalk and whiteboard easels. Then fast forwards to a teacher in a classroom signing to students. The teacher signs good morning. You see the exclamation mark? What does this mean, while pointing to the phrase on a flip chart easel? The students enthusiastically reply, good morning. Is that what this means? She asks, while quietly signing good morning. The students reply again with an enthusiastic good morning. She continues the lesson with several students coming to the easel as she helps them to fill in letters for the days of the week, communicating with them via ASL. She points to a question on the easel and signs, which do you like? Do you prefer dogs? Or do you prefer cats? Students come to the easel and write what they prefer. A student signs cats and dogs, both of them. The teacher signs, you can write this in 2 ways. CATSANDDOGS. Or BOTH. This means both. Which do you prefer? The student signs, I prefer CATDOG. The teacher signs, okay. That's fine. The student writes cat and dog. The last screen reads, Writing Skills in Kindergarten, 5 years old bridging ASL skills to writing English, telling a story using simple sentences using sight words, transcribing ASL sentences to English sentences.
The building blocks, also Legos, are critical for this age. It's for literacy. Language Milestones is one way we are continuing to support students with knowledge and resources, and along with language opportunities, and connecting those based on what you know from the language milestone assessments. Next slide, please. Age 0 to 5 is a critical time for language acquisition because this sets up a strong foundation of language. Once the child turns 5 years old, from ages 5 to 8, that is when they start to learn to read. Once they become 8, which is third grade, and on, they learn and they read to learn. A lot of the data we're seeing right now is usually ages 8 years old and on, and folks will label them and say they're stuck at the third grade reading level. And this is not because they are deaf, it's because they had limited language opportunities and they didn't have a strong foundation of language from 0 to 5. They need services provided along with the appropriate amount of peers, and we need a better system. I love this image. You can definitely save this for your own needs if you'd like. SB 210 is the key and the heart for a strong IFSP or IEP language plan. SB 210 language milestones guide the IFSP and IEP goals and services. This is in regards to language. Early Start and ECE teachers, early childhood education teachers, use them to ensure deaf children are meeting age-appropriate language milestones. Families also use them to advocate for their deaf child's language development. during an IFSP or IEP, especially during that ages 0 to 5 range. This is the key. Next slide. So the next question is, what does SB 210 data say? Next slide. This part is pretty brief, and then I will turn it over to Cornelia. In 2020, the SB 210 DRDP data, the results actually went back from all the way back to 2015. So it was 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. Those were all similar percentiles. So it's about 90 to 94 percentile. And this is for deaf children that are from 0 all the way up to 24 months, well, really more 3 years, so 36 months. They were meeting language milestones at age expectation. Now, once they turned 3, the numbers change. Instead of a 94.1 percentile, they actually digress to a 57.3 percentile. What's going on? We know something's missing when they become 3. This is actually because deaf infants and young deaf children get a lot more support services before the age of 3. Once they transfer over to Part B, the amount of services decrease. We need to be mindful of that, especially when they turn 3, 4, and 5. Oftentimes, services are dropped at the age of 3, then the child regresses, and all of these skills that they've learned have regressed. So, at any time a transition is made, ensure the same services follow the child, please. This is very recent data, spring of 2025. We are at a 78 percentile of deaf infants that are at age expectation. So it used to be 94, and now it's at 78. And we don't know why this is happening, actually. Now, as for preschoolers who are deaf for age 3 and older, they're actually doing better now. So it's very interesting to see this data. This is results from the DRDP of spring of 2025. We need more information. We need to understand this more, which means we need a better assessment involved. We need more details so that we can understand why we're getting this type of result. And that leads us to the next portion of the webinar. Next slide, please. Question number 3, what's next for SB 210? And now I'm going to officially call Cornelia Taylor. The floor is yours, Cornelia. Thank you.
Okay, I am going to talk a little bit about what is next for SB 210. Okay, next slide. As Julie has suggested, we have a full language milestones assessment that is available, and we will be putting a link to it in the chat. There it is. So you can, oh, no, that's the, next slide. So the language milestones assessment, which we call the LMA, is a product of SB 210, where there is a requirement that all children who are deaf or hard of hearing must be assessed every 6 months for language growth. And this is a very, this requires a sensitive assessment that could pick up 6 months of language growth and would be sensitive to language delays before they became many standard deviations below the mean. Next slide. So this is just a screenshot. Laura, I'm going to pause a second and let you put a link to the the assessment in the chat box. Or I can, okay, next slide. So the purpose of the statewide language milestones assessment is aligned to the purpose of the SB 210. Earlier in the Q&A, I had seen someone asking about does the language milestones replace the VSL? And what we have here on the slide, it does replace the Sky High Language Development Scale, which was the assessment originally selected to monitor language growth. The tool assesses ASL and English. You can assess the children using both or either one. It is required under California Education Code. The purpose is to help teachers and service providers understand and monitor language development, and that is to prevent language delays that are preventable through language exposure. So like Julie was talking earlier about language deprivation, this monitoring tool is one way to catch that early when it can be more easily remediated. It's not intended to determine eligibility. So a child could meet the language milestones, but still be eligible for special education. So it doesn't replace the tools that you're using for eligibility. And then the most important purpose of the tool, when there is delay detected using the language milestones assessment, it is critical that the team convene and adjust the child's services to ensure that they have what they need to meet the milestones in the future. And I see a question in the chat. I'm going to repeat the link to the folder with the tool. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we've talked about this before. The reason that we're doing the language milestones assessment is to understand the language development of children who are deaf and hard of hearing regionally and statewide. And this is not for punishing if percentages aren't what we would expect. This is for tracking where more supports are needed for children. So it is a way for the state to make sure that all children have access to these services. And let me just give a reminder. I see some more questions in the chat box. If you wouldn't mind clicking on the Q&A and putting your questions in there, that way it's easier for those of us behind the scenes to answer the questions and make sure we're answering them all. And so the first round of the language milestones is going to be administered on the same schedule as the DRDP. And your local area may have a different deadline. But for fall, we are asking that assessments are submitted by February 1st. And that in the spring, they are submitted by July 1st. And so that will continue on every year, February 1st, July 1st. And then a DHH credentialed teacher or other professionals working with the child within the IEP or IFSP team are expected to complete the language milestones. Next slide. So the language milestones, I'm sure if people have opened it up already, you see that it's a very straightforward, almost like a language screening assessment. The teacher, the DHH teacher or the service provider should use both their direct observation and conversations with the child's parent and caregiver to complete the items. Parent report will be especially valuable for skills that are inconsistently shown, so those that you don't see very often, and also behaviors that are difficult to observe in your setting. So for example, if you're a home visitor and the child doesn't have siblings, you may need to do some parent and caregiver interview to learn about the child's socialization with other peers and what their language looks like in those situations. And then just another reminder that the child can demonstrate language in ASL and English. Okay, next slide. Okay, so these are QR codes. And then I'm seeing in the chat box, the link is the smart, I'm guessing you're talking about the Smartsheet link is view only, but I think if you click on the form numbers, you can get to the form to complete them. Oh, someone's asking about the going back. Can we go back a slide? And I don't know, Allie, do you want to put in the chat box? Do you have a question? Oh, okay. And just another note, that's a good point. At July 1st, most schools are on summer break. So it is expected that you will turn it in for that child before you leave on summer break. It can be turned in anytime between February 1st and July 1st. So, okay, next slide. Okay, so these are just the steps to complete and submit the assessment. So the first thing you need to do is go to the folder and download the form. We have a form that includes the instructions and all the age level forms. And then we have each age level individually, so you can select which works best for you. Then you want to take the paper form and complete each item based on your observations and parent report. We recommend printing it and filling it out on paper. And then you need to gather information that you have about the child and the service provider. For example, if you're entering it for someone else, you'll need to get information about them. And then you access the online survey for that child's age. And then you need to complete it all in one go because Smartsheet doesn't allow you to save and come back later. So you need to have your paper completed, sit down, enter it all, and submit the survey. Next slide. Okay, so as I said before, this is if people have a QR code, you can just look up here and you can find the language milestones individual forms, which are in these different age ranges, or you can download the form that includes all of those age ranges. And then I see a question, all of my families are Spanish speakers. Am I just translating these same as the Sky High? If you can copy and paste that into the Q&A box, because you're probably not the only person with that question, and I don't know the answer. Okay, next slide. Okay, so once you get to the form, you're going to choose one of 3 responses for each of the items. If the child consistently demonstrates it, so that's a skill that they're showing across situations and people. If it's inconsistently demonstrated, which means it's only shown rarely, or it's only shown with some people and settings, or does not demonstrate, so the skill isn't observed. And for scoring purposes, we're just looking for behaviors that are consistently demonstrated, but we wanted to give opportunity to track smaller grain progress in some of these items where the child may be emerging into it. Next slide. Okay, so I had said earlier that you would need to gather information about the child and service provider. And so required fields that we need for our tracking and analysis include the date you completed the language milestones assessment, the teacher or service provider who was responsible for completing the instrument. Also, that person, you need that person's name and their email. You need the child's first and last name. We need their birth date so that we can verify their age with their birth date and the date that the language milestones was completed and make sure it was the right form. Then we need their special education eligibility if it's deaf or hard of hearing. We need the SELPA that the child is receiving services under, and we need the district of accountability or the district of residence. Next slide. And then these fields are optional. So the role of the service provider, the SSID, the gender, home language, additional disabilities. These are really great pieces of information for us to have for interpreting the data and figuring out how to best support programs. But we recognize that not all providers will have these at their fingertips. So next slide. Okay, so after you have the information, the child and service provider information gathered, and you've completed your paper form, you're going to go to the online survey, and there's a link to that in the chat. And you are going to click on the tile that is the child's chronological age. So the difference between their current birthday and the assessment date, how old they were then. And then once you click on that, that will take you to the survey. You can fill that out and submit it. And again, very important. There's no save and finish later option. So it's very important that you have your information ready before you sit down and enter it. Next slide. Okay, so again, this is just the steps. You download, you rate each item, you click the icon for that child's age-appropriate checklist, fill it out, and click Submit. Next slide. This is just reminding you, when you get to the bottom, there's a button that you'll have to press that submits the form. Next slide. Okay, Julie, I am going to pass it on to you and just remind folks, enter your questions into the Q&A and we'll do our best to answer those. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Cornelia. I always love watching you present. I really enjoy working with Cornelia and working with her to make this a reality. And now you are aware that the language milestone assessment is critical. Please utilize it for your families and students to create and develop services to support language development, not only for assessments and data, but also for services, service provision. And this could tie into ASL courses, deaf coaches, deaf mentors, going to a school where they have deaf peers. I know one family currently utilizes the language milestones to justify for their two deaf children who are the ages 2 or 3 need to go to California School for the Deaf. That's a very powerful tool to have. So, next question here. What resources help families and deaf children? Next slide. Lead-K Family Services is your EDI program. And we provide referrals to your programs, and that is how you keep your early starts in business with all of our referrals. Also, you would provide parent mentors to support new families during their journeys. And the parent mentors would also emphasize language milestones to support language services. Lead-K Family Services also trains. We have a curriculum embedded that ties into the language milestones for deaf coaches, deaf mentoring in the homes of families with deaf babies and young children. And the third thing here I really want to focus on is deaf coaching. Next, please. So the three folks here on the slide are the three administrators for the Lead-K Family Services team. Now, Sherry Farina is the CEO of NorCal Services for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. She is responsible for all of the funding and managing the funding. Cheryl Bella and myself are the California co-coordinators of Lead-K Family Services. So if you have any questions about referrals, mentoring, deaf coaching, please reach out to myself, Sherry, and Cheryl Bella. Cheryl Bella is the coordinator, and we all act as a team, and we are your team. If you ever need to contact us, our email is listed at the bottom. I also will put that in the chat as well, and you can save that for later. I also want to emphasize that the three of us are deaf professionals, and we have become deaf role models by default to families. 90 to 95% of families are hearing who have never met a deaf adult before or a child. So it's critical for them to see deaf adults in leadership roles, such as we are, and informing them about language that comes from us. Sherry and I have been very involved since day one with Lead-K, the campaign of Lead-K, Lead-K Family Services, and now this assessment tool. I have great pride to show that this is deaf-centered, deaf-ran, and really, it works. Now, under the Lead-K Deaf Coach coordinators, we have them all listed here throughout California. We have them in the Sacramento area, Bay Area, Fresno, Los Angeles, Orange County, Riverside, and also San Diego. If you want more information on how to get deaf coaching services, you can actually reach out to Cheryl Bella, the coordinator, or myself and Sherry Farina to get more information on how to get deaf coach services, and those tie into the language milestones. Again, language milestones set up language goals, and to be able to achieve these language goals is you would hire a deaf coach. and the IFSP IEP team would be responsible for hiring those coaches. Now, what does a deaf coach do? You may be wondering, what are the benefits here? They teach ASL. They teach an expansive vocabulary. They engage with the family. They model the use of sign language and visual communication when interacting with the child, giving different examples of making sure that at the dinner table, the child has access to all of the information and conversations that are happening. We don't want to continue this issue of dinner table syndrome. A lot of deaf children or deaf people in general feel left out during Thanksgiving, Christmas, or any type of holiday during this dinner time where everyone is having a conversation and usually the deaf child is left out. How to engage your deaf child so that they feel important, they feel valued, and they feel recognized and seen. Share about the general experiences of deaf people. That's what they do. What deaf people like doing, how we navigate life every day in the world. Because this world is designed for hearing folks. However, we still find a way to exist in this world. So it's so nice for families to see that if deaf leaders can, my child can too. Also, introducing families to events in the deaf community. We have like coffee events, deaf night out, bringing them to love and literacy events. By the way, love and literacy will be happening soon in March. It's the third week of March. Please look forward to LEAD-K Family Services. We will be posting that. Love and literacy events is where you will get free books for your child, along with ASL storytelling at that event. Deaf children have an opportunity to meet deaf role models there, along with meeting deaf coaches, because they will be present as well at that event. Deaf coaching helps children naturally acquire language in any of their environments. Next, please. A lot of folks have asked, how can I get my school to pay for deaf coaching? Folks, this is a given. If you look at the Part C early intervention, this is under IDEA, we have this portion. It's the 34 CFR 303.13b. This is the types of early intervention services. And there is sign language listed here along with teaching sign language. And spoken language is used here, oral. All of that is listed. And you can use this to justify why deaf coaching should be paid for. Next slide. And you know what? That's it, folks. Thank you so much. And I'd like to bring Cornelia back on so we can answer your questions.
Julie, I don't know if you see we have 67 questions in the question box. How do you want to approach?
I'll go ahead and have Nancy come back and she can choose the questions. If you could spotlight Nancy.
Great suggestion. I have a few questions that have a similar theme to it, and they're asking about the assessment. They said that the assessment seems like it's not designed for listening and spoken language, and they want to know who was involved in developing this language milestone assessment. Could you talk a little bit about that aspect of it? Thank you.
Julie here. The language milestones are a universal approach, and this is in alignment with California Department of Education's language standards. It is in total alignment. Now, the folks who are involved, we have John Tracy Clinic along with Chat Center, and we have CEID and California School for the Deaf, and Nancy and I. That's it. Most of the folks involved are oral only.
This assessment impacts all those that have all types of hearing level. It doesn't matter the child's hearing ability. The benefit of this assessment and the purpose of this assessment is to measure that child's language development at a certain age. And that assessment will help educators figure out what area to work on and to address with that child when teaching that child or when working with that family if they're requesting more resources and support. It's really important that we all have that same view here. We want the student to become successful regardless of their hearing level when expressing in their preferred language, whether it's signed or spoken English.
Julie here. The point is language, right? And we want every deaf child to acquire robust language skills, whether this be in ASL or English. They're interchangeable.
And this assessment is required for only California residents, right? It's not outside of the state.
Correct.
It's just for the state. Okay, that was one question that came up from the audience.
Julie here. While we are on this topic about who's involved with the language milestones development, I want you to be aware that we developed this based on 8 or more existing assessment tools. To give you an example, Sunshine, I think it was Sunshine Cottage, I believe. If I remember correctly, uh, also VCASL was in there, along with Sky High. We looked at all of the existing assessments, looking at the language milestones included, and we circled out what was common, a common theme throughout all of them. And then we pulled them together and focused on both sign language and spoken language. And then we did some alignment there. I saw there was one person that said, why is there lower expectations? It's not necessarily the case. We used normal referenced assessments. We took the norm of what was out there and what would be typical for a hearing child and their language. And we put that in alignment. So we have the same on par expectation of deaf children and hearing children.
Thank you. I have another question for the two of you. This is really more for Cornelia. So if you've not submitted previous reports, should I go back in history and submit those, or do you start now and continue in the future? What would be your best suggestion?
If it's a language milestones assessment that you completed this fall, you should complete that one. You should submit that assessment. But if it's a language milestones assessment that you completed before this fall, you should not submit, and moving forward, you'll just be submitting in the fall and the spring.
Thank you, Cornelia. So let's say you've done all the reports for your students. Then you have that data. You'll give it to Cornelia and her team, and then they will work out the results of that data. And CDE will post those results every year to be able to see trends. that will then help your school district or your early start provider, wherever it is that you're located, look at the overall picture holistically of what's going on with the child's or student's language development. Another question for you, Cornelia. Do you have to do both the DRDP and the LMA?
That's a great question. Yes. And the reason is that they serve different purposes. So the DRDP is a multi-domain assessment that's administered through authentic assessment. The LMA is a much finer grained zooming in on the child's language. And so it is designed to support the goal of SB 210 of preventing language delay and identifying language deprivation. So we do both because they have different purposes, but because the language milestones is a more detailed assessment, you can use the language milestones to fill out the DRDP. Many of the skills that you would need for the foundational language development domain of the DRDP are already in the language milestones assessment. So you can use it as a piece of documentation.
So if a student is not showing anything within that age range, are you recommending that they move down an age bracket to see where they are in their language milestones?
Is that Julie? I could answer, or Julie.
Go ahead, Cornelia.
Okay.
I can add to your answer.
We want you to complete and submit the form for the child's chronological age, which is their birth date and their assessment date minus their birth date, regardless of prematurity or when they received any sort of hearing devices. And if the child doesn't pass any of the milestones for their age, you would go ahead and submit that form to us without those completed. But this is the benefit of printing the version of the language milestones with all the age forms in it. So to work with the parent, you might go backwards and complete an earlier chronological age form so that you can track the child's progress and you can communicate clearly with the family about the need for additional services. Julie?
So let me explain my experience. I've been asked this question from several people who have done the survey. There was a question on, can I use the child's hearing age? What this means is if a child is 2, but they just got a cochlear implant, which would mean their hearing age is 0. They would start at 0, and I said absolutely not. It needs to be the child's chronological age. The child is 2, which means they would start with that age. And if not, you can go back to see where the child is at to identify where they are. Yes.
I have many, many more questions that have come in. I do have a recommendation. Those questions will be converted into a Q&A that we will post on the webpage under the State Special Schools and Services Division. When we send out the recording of this webinar, we'll add a link to the webpage where you can look for an updated Q&A that will hopefully answer many of the important questions that were asked today. I really, really appreciate the presentation that was given today, and it was a great start. As you know, webinars are a great place to learn information, and then once you leave, you typically will have more questions come up than you had during the webinar. This is just the beginning, and we hope to be using this tool, and that as more people use this, they will be more comfortable, and then they'll be able to be more comfortable in what to submit and how to submit and when. We're going to put everything in order as we go through this together. I want to say thank you to Dr. Cornelia Taylor and Dr. Julie Remsamario for their amazing webinar. Thank you to CDE for their sponsorship in making this webinar possible. Thank you as well to our interpreters for today.
And thank you to Dr. Nancy Leibach-Amon for hosting this. I feel the love, folks. Thank you.
You can't send us too many hearts.